Welcome to the University of Rio Grande for another edition of SAFETYNET, where today's special guest is Sergeant Chris Smith of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. Stay tuned. Welcome to SAFETYNET. My name is Scott Borden. I'm the campus police chief for the University of Rio Grande. With us today is Lieutenant Barry Call, post commander of the Gallipolis post, as he normally is, and will shortly give us an update on the area. Special guest today is Sergeant Chris Smith of the Ohio State Highway Patrol Commercial Enforcement and Licensing Standards. Big long thing that you can explain in great detail. I thought, today being 9/11, we do something just a little bit different. We've got a lot of years of law enforcement here, and 9/11 is a day of a somber day for America and remembrance. And as law officers, it changed. As it changed everybody, it changed law enforcement and us as troopers at the time. What a lot of our duties were and the things that we had to do, and I just thought it was, if we could maybe just tell our stories of where we were, and I'll sort of start off. 9/11 was always a day that I remembered anyway. It's 41 years ago today on 9/11 that I started my career in the Highway Patrol, and then after 9/11 it became even a more prevalent date in my life and other Americans, as 18 years ago that happened in New York. I was the assistant district commander to Jackson District Headquarters, and my wife Sandy had called and said that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. And my first thought, like I think we talked about earlier, was it was maybe a small plane that got lost, or weather conditions. So didn't really think anything of it. And then she called back and said another plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. So obviously knew something was up. So went into our captain's office, and we had a small TV, and then we saw the events as they unfolded, and it was obviously something much more tragic and much more sophisticated terrorist attack. So an interesting side note on that is what a lot of people don't realize is that Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, we actually, while I was in the room at the district headquarters, got a call from the FBI and then a call from the FAA asking if we had had a plane crash in the Rio Grande area. And if you Google and look at some of the tracks, you'll see that Flight 93 actually flew right over Rio Grande on the way to Pennsylvania. So that tragedy could have very easily have happened from here anywhere to Shanksville. So Barry, do you have, when you were...
The day it occurred, I was on our day off at our family farm working, and just happened to have the radio on in the pickup truck, and heard the news on the radio, and then I went home and kind of started watching some footage on television, and obviously in shock. It's not something us as Americans are used to. Not just the first airplane, but the second, and then the third one hit the Pentagon, and the fourth one went down in Pennsylvania. Obviously, I was working that day, but when I went back to work, things changed so much for law enforcement from that day forward, and it continues to change with acts of violence such as that people have done on not just us, but other countries as well.
I remember that was the second day I was, as a sergeant, just recently promoted, was working in the basement of the Portsmouth Post, completing a payroll audit, and somebody come down and mentioned that a plane had hit one of the Trade Center buildings. We then turned on the news and thinking it was a small plane, just a freak incident, something like that due to weather. Then we watched the second one hit the building. I realized at that point there was a lot more going on than what we could ever imagine. With all the other happenings throughout the day, we saw the whole role of law enforcement change, our whole role of the Highway Patrol and law enforcement, because up until then we were focused on traffic enforcement, crashes, OVI arrests, things like that, and then it went to the threats on politicians, the threats on the military, the threats on the United States itself. So the whole role, going from traffic to Then we had terroristic threats, terroristic watch list. It changed the whole role and whole direction of law enforcement in general of the United States. So, I mean, we saw it within a blink of an eye change completely.
Well, and you know, being the three of us in law enforcement, I mean, you know, just it's just tragic if one law enforcement officer or one our brother firemen are lost, and just what horrified me, and I'm sure horrified all law enforcement and you guys up here too, is, you know, to lose that many police officers and to lose that many firemen in one swift action is just something that's always in the back of your mind. And, you know I speak for you guys that, you know, the thoughts and prayers go out to all the families and the victims, whether civilian or law enforcement or fire personnel. So, Barry, this is when we normally give you an opportunity to talk about what's going on in Gallia and Meigs County and around the state, if there's any other issues.
We've been pretty busy at the post. We just came off the Labor Day reporting period. Actually, that was one of the safe, as a division across the state, one of the safest Labor Day we've had for 3 or 4 years. We did have one fatality in the Gallia County area during Labor Day weekend. Our guys continue to work the roads, look for the obvious signs of people impaired, distracted driving, obviously any of our traffic laws, speeding, safety belt. You know, we still encourage people to buckle up, make sure when you're driving you have both eyes on what's in front of you, and do your best not to be distracted, because the more we delve into this distracted driving, there's more and more crashes out there that happen because people are distracted. And you know, we haven't done what we haven't done in the past, what we're doing now to dig a little deeper into these crashes to figure out that, you know, someone may have been messing with the radio, whatever. But you know, it's becoming very prevalent. It's a big campaign of ours right now. So please don't drive distracted. Wear your seatbelt. We continue to work the roads. We got working a lot of school zones now, school zones and following school buses. Next month we'll have School Bus Safety Week coming up, so we'll concentrate even more on school bus safety in October too.
Would you take just a minute to, you know, people see the move over, slow down, and you know, that's a big deal too, and maybe they don't understand, and the people like at the college and university and just out in the public, and once you get away from patrol, they'll always say, I mean, just sort of explain that a little bit. I mean, obviously the reasoning behind it
Right.
is and maybe just talk about if someone is in the left lane or in the right lane, and then there's vehicles in the left lane, they're not able to move over to the left, at least give them, I mean, slow down.
Right.
I mean, because the officers will realize you can't move over.
Right. On a 4-lane highway, you know, if you see a, not just a police officer, but it could be any first responder, EMS, fire department, tow truck, could be somebody working for the transportation department, you know, highway garage. If you're on a 4-lane, you need to move over to the left lane if possible. Obviously, you're going to slow down and move over, make that move safely. And there are times where, you know, there may be somebody out there in that left lane that doesn't allow it, that you can't move over. Also, we don't want you to cause a crash to avoid getting close to one of us. But the main thing, you slow down. Slow down to reasonable speed. Just last week, we had a guy in a U-Haul truck. One of our troopers up north was out with a disabled vehicle, and U-Haul truck came along and sideswiped the trooper. Actually, we've had several of those this year, just with us. So it's an important law. Like I said, it's not just for us; it's all for all first responders. But even on a 2-lane highway, obviously, if you got oncoming traffic, we don't want you driving left to center. But again, just slow down and use good common sense. When you see somebody on the road, whether it be one of us, a tow truck, or whatever it may be, but slow down. If you can get over, get over.
No, that's just good advice. I mean, I think the biggest mistake people make is when they see the lights. I mean, patrol lights are just so magnified now from when I was on that, you know, that's when you start slowing down. I think a lot of people have a bad habit of they get up close to see what's going on, then they start slowing down. But start slowing down and, you know, 2-lane road or 4-lane, just slow down, and at least gives the officer a chance and gives you a chance to avoid.
Also important when you see somebody like a trooper or deputy or whoever it may be, don't just focus on them. You know, you need to be cognizant of your surroundings, so that way you can make those moves to avoid hitting anybody.
No, that's good advice. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
if you would, just tell us a little bit about what your life was before you got to the patrol, the area you're from, just a little bit about yourself before you got onto the patrol.
Okay, I grew up in Lawrence County in Ironton, went to St. Joe School in Ironton, attended Ohio University for a short time prior to being hired by the patrol. In high school, I met a young trooper being trained, and I knew I was interested in law enforcement because a little bit of a family background in law enforcement. And once I got talking to the young trooper being trained, he started explaining to me what about the patrol and different things about the patrol, and it piqued my interest. So I started checking into that and was hired as a cadet dispatcher in '91 until I entered the academy in '92, January of '92, as a classmate with Lieutenant Call. Once I graduated from the academy in June of '92, I transferred to the northwest corner of the state in Defiance for about a year. I went back to my hometown of Ironton and worked for about 9 years, was promoted to Portsmouth. I always seemed to return back home, went back to Ironton as a sergeant, and went back to Ironton until 2016, and when 2016 I transferred to the Licensed Commercial Standards section and to where I'm working at presently.
That brings up an important thing is let everybody know what the license and commercial standards is, because the highway patrol is broken down into a lot. They've got investigator sections. They've got, you know, everybody thinks that troopers are all just troopers, and they are troopers and sergeants, lieutenants. But you have the troopers that work the road. You also have, you know, 4 or 5 different sections. But you're stationed over at the CDL building in Jackson. Just sort of explain overall how many people you have, what sections you have, and what those people do.
The Licensed Commercial Standards section is on McCarty Lane. We've got actually 4 different sections, or 4 different job classifications in my facility. Under my section, I guess we have what we call it's a DOT inspection side. I've got motor carrier enforcement that are civilian employees, and also troopers that are federally certified they patrol the highways and look for trucks more than 10,000 pounds, working for commercial use, and they conduct inspections on those federal standard inspections on those type of trucks and trailers to make sure they're up to standards, make sure they're safe for the people traveling on the roadway, so nobody has any concerns as they're going down the road, because I know a lot of people seem to be concerned when they're traveling beside a commercial truck, things like that. But my guys are out there, that group is out there conducting the inspections to make sure brakes are safe, make sure trailers are safe, make sure the drivers are licensed, and everybody's registered, paying their required registration fees. They're doing that every day. I've got 5 inspectors out there, 3 troopers and 2 motor carrier inspectors that are out there doing that each day. I also have a load limit inspector, portable load limit inspector, who's out working the 10-county district, looking for overweight trucks. He works with all the troopers throughout the district, looking for overweight trucks, whether that's log trucks or sand haulers, gravel haulers, whatever it may be. Anything that would be over the 80,000 pound limit, or depending on the size of the truck, it could be less than 80,000, but Ohio's the maximum is 80,000. Then I have a group of 5 inspectors that they handle school bus inspections. There's 1,047 school buses in the district, 10 county district. They're handling inspections for those, doing a minimum of 2 inspections per year on those, but they're also handling salvage inspections when insurance companies claim a vehicle is a total out. A lot of them are rebuilt as salvage vehicles, so they have to be brought to our facility to have an inspection, a safety inspection, and ensure there's no stolen parts being used.
Well, and I think that's a good point, that I think maybe a lot of people in the public don't realize that troopers or employees of the patrol actually inspect school buses to keep them safe. They probably maybe feel that, or think that the schools actually do it, but that's a big deal for you guys.
Yeah, we work hand in hand with the school transportation departments. Ohio has one of the most strict inspection processes in the United States. I'm aware of that. But we conduct 2 inspections, a minimum of 2 inspections per year. One's a full annual inspection, which we're completely under the bus, looking for any cracks, any brake issues, any airline issues, inside and out, checking the buses. We do that the first part of the school year. The second part of the school year, we'll go through and they'll do a spot inspection. We just randomly stop at schools and we'll check 3 to 6 buses to make sure that they're keeping them up to standards. But like I said, we do work in conjunction with the transportation departments, transportation directors, and just it's a team effort to make sure that we're running as safe as buses as possible in Ohio.
Well, and as far as truck inspections, I think probably truck drivers think that that's just to harass them and stuff, and the weights. But you know, you probably go in a little bit more detail. But when a truck's overweight, it's not just about they're carrying too much stuff and they want to find them. Trucks have a lesser ability to stop at speed. So that's why one of the reasons that troopers are fairly strict on, or probably more than fairly strict on the speed for trucks. But if you have a car and a truck, a big semi, or even a double trailer, and they're both going the exact same speed, you want to have that truck where the tires are good, the brakes are good, and if that weight is much more than what it should be, so you said 80,000 pounds, if it's 110,000 pounds, the ability for that truck to stop before someone pulls out in front of them is a thing.
The thing I found when I came into this position was working with the truck drivers and working with the companies, because we've got a pretty good working relationship with a lot of the companies, local companies, and we have safety meetings every quarter trying to work together to focus on our crash picture, to improve our crash picture, to improve to lower our crashes, the number of crashes. But most of the truck drivers have a good working relationship with us as our inspectors, because they want to have as safe a truck as possible also. A lot of companies will do shortcut and they'll rig something that it's going to get by. And a lot of the truck drivers want us to inspect their trucks. They'll pull in and ask us to inspect their trucks because they don't want to be driving down the road in a truck it's 80,000 pounds or more, and they know it's unsafe. So a lot of them welcome our inspections. They know that our safety, when we do an inspection, it actually improves the safety rating of the company, which helps with insurance costs. It helps with overall cost of the company. So I mean, a lot of times it's more welcome than I could ever imagine when I first got into this position.
Chris, maybe you can go in a little bit about the training that you guys went through as far as to inspect not just a school bus, but a commercial vehicle. It's several weeks. I know it's pretty extensive training.
Yeah, we start out with a week-long training. The initial training is what we call Part 1, Part A. It's actually just going into the documentation of the driver, documentation of the truck, to make sure it's registered properly, make sure the driver's licensed properly. Then we have we have a total of 6 weeks, because we have one week's focusing on the driver, the second week's focusing actually on the truck itself, truck and trailers, which we go into measuring the brakes, the push rods on the brakes. We go into, we take a creeper completely under truck. We're looking for cracks in the frame, cracks in the springs, cracks out wheel-wise if the lug nuts are loose, tight, cracks in the wheels. Focusing on the actual construction of the truck and the trailer, the motor, whether it's an oil leak, a transmission fluid leak, safety with the fire extinguishers, with the logbooks. A lot of our problems we run into is with logbook issues, where they've actually recently went to e-logs, which is electronic logs, which is a lot easier for the guys and gals driving, because it's all electronic. They can hit a button when they start driving, things like that. But we go in extensive training in the hazardous material. We have a week-long hazardous material, which focuses on tanker trucks. Then we have another week that's focusing on actual small amounts of hazardous material being transported in over-the-road trucks. And lastly, we do a motor coach, which is a lot of your tour buses. It's a lot of individualized training on the different types of trucks that are out on the road. Like I said, we end up with a motor vehicle or motor coach, which is the tour buses, the Greyhound buses, things like that are used.
I know you mentioned that you guys work pretty close with a lot of trucking companies. Maybe you touch on the human trafficking aspect. I know that a lot of truck companies are really involved with law enforcement, not just in Ohio, but across the United States, and assisting us with human trafficking. Yeah,
nationwide there's a group called Truckers Against Trafficking. There's an 800 number. If anybody suspects anything of anybody being a victim or even a trafficker involved in human trafficking, and a lot of people, they think of human trafficking, they think of it whether it's prostitution or what. Human trafficking is when a victim is doing, whether they're selling their body, selling themselves, and it's against their will. They're being coerced to do it. They're not out there because they want to be. There's somebody else collecting the fees, and we see it. It does happen here locally. A lot of times people think we're in small town Southern Ohio, and it doesn't happen. We've got victims that live right around here that have been involved in human trafficking in Columbus or Huntington, things like that. So the truckers do work with us very openly, work with us, and they're out watching in the truck stops. They're out watching in the rest areas, and they don't hesitate to report it. If a phone call goes in, the phone call goes into a central hub that it trickles down to the local law enforcement, and we can check for whether we check for the truck, we check a residence at a house, or residence in a neighborhood, something like that, and we can follow up on it. Because the patrol has a pretty extensive program on the human trafficking.
Right.
And we're looking for victims. That's something I've always, before I retire, I would love to be able to say I saved somebody from a human trafficking issue.
That's a very worthy goal and mission. Another good mission is school bus safety, because school started back up. I know all of us have had children and worried about our kids getting to school, and we still as you guys as troopers, and I still worry about it. But I know it's one of the topics that you wanted to hit on today. But talk about school bus safety, what your guys do. Part of it is the inspection of the school buses, but what are the most common laws that are broken with school buses, and what your guys do to prevent it, and what can the citizens do to make it so that they don't commit those violations?
What we do at the post level is, like I mentioned before, we work with school zones, for one thing, but we follow school buses to observe if there are any violations. Obviously, when we're close to a school bus, a lot of times you don't see a violation. We get most of our school bus violation complaints from school bus drivers. Passing a stop school bus is the only law on the books in Ohio that law enforcement can write a citation for without actually observing the violation. So each post has a complaint form that the transportation director has, and when they have a violator pass the stop school bus, if they get their information as far as make and color of the car, license plate, I will assign a trooper to follow up on that, and then if applicable, we'll take enforcement action on that. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes they get the wrong plate and so forth, but no, we've had quite a few of them over the years, with probably more than, I'm guessing, probably 50 to 60% with enforcement action. Most people will realize when they're talking to them that, I didn't see the lights or whatever, but it's a violation that we take very seriously, because could be small kids crossing the road. So there's really not, we don't, pretty much if there's no doubt at all, we take enforcement, and it's also something that the courts take serious too, because just being that impatient or being in that big a hurry for just a split second can cause a tragedy.
Yeah, last year alone, we had, in 1 week, we had 4 kids nationwide killed due to passing a stop school bus violation. So it is something we take serious. Also with that, I guess we want to get out there that a lot of the buses are equipped with video cameras on the side, and now, in the past, we couldn't use that as evidence to document the violations and use it in court. Now it's in a safety manual by the Department of Education and the Highway Patrol that those can be used. And a lot of schools are starting to put those on their buses, so people want to think twice before they take the chance, before they do pass a stop school bus.
And it's always been my experience in court that that's probably one of the most uncomfortable positions for a defendant to be in, is looking up at the judge and explaining why you passed a stop school bus. I mean, it's just hard. Other than you just say I wasn't paying attention, and that doesn't help your cause at all. But is there any tips maybe you have on what people can watch out or do that would give them, because it's not to keep, because the goal is you don't want people to pass stop school buses. It's not like a speed trap or something that people have this perception where you want them to speed and you give them a speeding ticket. The Highway Patrol would be happy if there was never a stop school bus violation ever. So, I mean, is there anything that the public can do that should probably just slow down, probably?
I think on normal routes, normal school bus routes, a lot of the back roads that we have here in this area, you have the same people traveling the roads every day. They're coming at the same time, whether they're running late for work, whatever it may be. And normally that seems to be the problem, is people run late for work and they take the chance to go ahead and pass it. So I think giving themselves some extra time driving, try to be careful and watch for the yellow lights flashing, because they'll see the yellow lights flashing before the red lights come on.
I know
And be cognizant.
in our area here, the school bus routes don't alternate a whole lot.
No.
They're pretty much stay the same, and people know that. So you got to plan ahead to make sure that you allow yourself enough time if you get in behind that school bus for 2 or 3 stops.
And I think people are surprised that they think, like you mentioned, Barry, a very good point, that the school bus drivers can actually report the violation, where I think people think, well, if I passed it, well, I'm glad there were no cops around.
Right.
You know, so they need to be aware of that. We got about 2 minutes left. So what do you see? How many years you have on the highway patrol now, Chris?
28, no?
Yeah, 28
both got the
total.
same.
Yeah.
What do you think has changed the most since when you started to now? I know the terrorism was a lot, the drugs are bad. Is there anything else you've seen? Or
Well, I think you've seen a focus on, when we first come on, it was arrest. I mean, a lot of focus on the arrest, and now we're starting to see a focus with the drug opioid problem in our area. Is starting to see a lot of focusing on getting the treatment and getting other alternative methods
Right.
to other than just arrest and jail time. It's alternative methods to getting the people help.
Because we realize that we're not just us as the patrol, but law enforcement in general, realize that we're not going to beat this opioid epidemic just by arresting everybody. You know, we've got to give them alternative routes to seek help.
You see all the clean needle programs, you see all these different programs that are popping up. I'll say, do I always agree with it? At first I didn't. At first I was hesitant about it, but now it's like we're starting to see the problems slowing down. And problems are used to. Our area was one of the highest in the United States for overdoses, and just down the road, things like that. So I mean, you're starting to see these programs being successful.
I know we're a little spoiled in Southern Ohio, but over your years, what do you feel like the public perception is of law enforcement, and especially as a trooper? I think we're spoiled down here a little bit, because I think it's just with the fire departments and things, it's just maybe a little tighter knit group than maybe other places. And what's your just the overall, Chris, how you personally feel that you're accepted in law enforcement now? Is it a greater love, or like a fireman, or has it gone downhill?
I think over the last several years, you've had a lot of your groups that have focused on law enforcement, and you've seen the shootings and things on national news. Here locally, I don't think we have that issue. Law enforcement and public safety in general is very respected. But I think nationwide there's issues, but locally, and we all work well together. It's one goal, same team, different uniform, is what I've said many a times, is we have a goal in mind, and we're all going to work together. I think we tried to do our best to do that.
I agree. I think locally it's real good, and even I think even nationwide it's probably better than what we actually anticipate.
Yeah.
No, and that's good, and that's a good way to leave it. This went really fast and good, and Chris, that's because you were a great guest, and Barry, great co-host, and we appreciate you watching, and stay tuned next month.